Alright, the next thing we're going to be doing here is changing the oil. That is an 8mm Allen to get that drain plug off. And I'm going to try to do it with this big drain pan and hopefully get it all to go in the drain pan. With the center stand here, it's right in the way. Okay, that broke loose. Now ideally you'd want to run this motor for a little while to get it warmed up. I'm taking the oil pan off also, so I'm not going to do that. And now I'm going to take the fill off, so hopefully it will help it drain a little bit faster. And man, that oil is dirty. Alright, so we're going to let that drain, and then we're going to get ready to pull the oil pan also after this drains for a little bit. Okay, got all the oil drained out of it. Now I'm going to go around with a 10mm socket and start taking all the bolts out for the oil pan. There's quite a few bolts here. Looks like 6 on each side, 2 down the back, 2 down the front. So I'm going to go ahead and take those off. I'm not going to video it because it's just taking bolts off from the oil pan. So I'm going to go ahead and take those bolts off and we'll be back to pull the oil pan. Okay, here's the strainer. I'm going to remove it to clean it. But I don't know if you can see up there above the clip, there's a little hole that the strainer, that little wire clip goes into. So I just used a little pick like this to pull out on one side of it on this side, and then pulled out on the other side, and the strainer comes out. My strainer looks pretty good, just a little dirty. So I'm just going to clean it off and put it back in the same way I just took it out, and clean up all the gasket material, or all the edges here where the oil seal sits on, and do the same with the pan, and we'll get ready to put this back in. But hopefully this will take care of the oil leak that this bike had. I did notice after taking all these bolts out, there is a pattern that BMW says to take them out, and I didn't think about looking to see if there was anything like that taking it off, but I will put it back on in that same pattern. It's like a crisscross pattern. Start 1 here, 2 here, or 2 here, then 3, then 4, something like that. I'll look at the pattern when I go to put it back on. But when I took this off, all of the bolts were very, very loose. None of them had much tension on them at all. That could be why it was leaking, or maybe it's just a low, very low torque setting for these bolts. But I mean, it was really loose, like just a little more than finger tight on every one of them. So I was really surprised, and now I probably know why it has an oil leak, but maybe it's just a really low torque setting. Okay, got the drain pan, the oil pan clean. Looks so much better. I've got a new crush washer that I'm going to put on the drain plug. I clean the drain plug off too. I like to squirt a little brake fluid or brake cleaner around the drain plug, get the to get all the oil off of it and all the dirt and grime and everything off of the threads. So I'm going to put that on, and then I'm going to I'm just going to put it on there for now, and I'll torque it down once we get the drain pan back on. The screen is cleaned. I've got that back on, and I'm going to look at the pattern that you have to do to tighten these bolts up. And I've got my new oil pan gasket all ready to go. Here's the new oil pan gasket. So I'll get that on. I'm not using any RTV or anything on this gasket. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't want it for the mess that it creates if you ever take the pan off. It just makes a huge mess. When I bought this oil pan gasket, I did buy two in case I ever have to take it off again, or when I take it off again to clean that sump screen. So there was a lot of, not a lot, but there was a layer of sludge along the bottom of the oil pan itself, which leads me to believe that it hasn't come off in a very long time. And so, like I said, all the bolts were loose too, like just barely being finger tight. So that probably explains why it had such a bad oil leak. But peace of mind to go ahead and replace it, clean it out, get it good as new, and it should be good to go for a very long time. Alright, sorry for the little hiss in the background. I did fire up my air compressor to blow out this oil pan once I cleaned it. I didn't want any residue of the cleaner left in there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to see if I can do it this way. I'm just going to put two bolts through the oil pan and see if I can hold both of them on as I slide it into place. That way it'll keep the oil pan gasket from sliding around. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this to get it over the sump and not lose that back bolt. And there, it just fell out. Let's see if I can find one of the holes back there. I just want to make sure I can hold that gasket in place. And of course I can't find any hole back there. Come on. Where's that? Alright, there we go. Alright, so I'm going to guide this front one in and just try to get it finger tight. And then try to do the same with the back one here that I'm just holding. Oops. Finger tight. Take two. The way this pan sits, it's hard to get your fingers up there and start any of the bolts. Especially with gloves on. Let's see if that'll stay in place. No, it won't. Get the gloves back on. Gloves off. They're very long bolts for these oil pans. Alright, get that one snug. Let's see if I can get back on this one. Of course not. Go around on the other side. I'm just going to snug this back one up here just a hold everything tight in place. Said these are some super long bolts. Alright, so that's just snug. I'll do the same with this front one. And now I'm going to go check out the book, see what the pattern is, and put all the bolts in and get the torques and torque them down. Alright, I've got the oil pan gasket on, and let's see if my camera will pick up the book to show you the pattern of tightening up those bolts. I don't know if it'll pick up the numbers, but it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now the book didn't show a torque specs for these bolts, and it just said to tighten them. But I went ahead and torqued them to about 9 foot-pounds. I knew they were pretty, they weren't tight, real tight when I took them off. So I did about 9 foot-pounds on those to torque them down. So the oil drain plug is torqued to 22 foot-pounds, which seems like a lot to me, but that's what the book does say. So I'm going to torque down the drain plug, and it will be ready to remove the oil filter. I didn't put this drain plug in very far when I put it in. Man, that just seems so tight. There we go. 22 foot-pounds. So now we're going to move a few things out of the way here, and we'll pull the oil filter. I don't know if you can see from there. Let's move you around. We're going to pull the oil filter cover off here. I've got a new set of oil filter. I say filters because there's actually 2 filters that go in there, and I'm guessing they're broken half like that. I don't know if you can see up in there. I'm guessing they're broken half like that to come out over the exhaust, so you don't have to remove your exhaust every time you change your oil filters. So we're gonna get that. I gotta get the right Allen socket for that one to get that off, and pull those oil filters. Alright, we're getting ready to pull the oil filter housing off. I did have to go through with an Allen key, it's 5 millimeters, to break that loose, and because it's hard to get around this exhaust. I'm surprised the Germans didn't put a little hump or something in that exhaust to get around it a little easier. Once you get it broken loose, you can put a socket or a long Allen key in there on a socket and get it off, but it's kind of a tight fit, and I didn't want to take a chance of stripping it. So we can get them loose the rest of the way. There's a washer on these. bolts that come out. Alright, now like I said, this is the first time I've done this. And there's another bolt there, so I wasn't expecting that. Looks like a 13. Nope. Sure, it looks like a 13 or a 14. Guess it's a 16. That's strange. Got the dropsies today. These gloves are slick with oil on them.
There's the cover off. And the filter's in there. So now I'm going to do my pick. So I'm going to pick the filters out. I'll drain there for a second. And these are oil filters. And you get your new filters. You just fold over onto each other. And you feed them back in. There you go. So wipe this cover out a little bit, get this oil out of it.
Okay, the torque on that is 88 inch-pounds. So my torque wrench set up. Yeah, 88 inch-pounds. And I'm going to clean this cover off. I think I did buy a new gasket for this, but this gasket looks perfect, so I'm going to reuse it and save it for next time. If it does leak, I will change it, but it looks perfect. Yeah, it looks absolutely perfect. So it actually looks fairly new. So I'm wondering if somebody did replace it not too long ago. Maybe they thought that's where the oil leak was coming from, and they replaced it. Alright, so I got my cover cleaned. And we're going to put it back on. Now I know for these bolts it did not have a torque spec in my book for them. I guess because it's the Allen key and it's hard to get to, so I'm just going to snug them up pretty good with this, and then I'll try to get them uniformly tightened with the Allen key. Click, click. Perfect. Alright. Alright, so we got the oil filters changed, Get the new oil pan gasket on. Got the drain plug torqued. Now it's time to add oil to it. Alright, putting the oil in. This bike takes 2.4 quarts. So I measured it out. That's 2,270 milliliters. And this is the Castrol GTX 2050. That's what I had read from some of the forums to use in this bike. So this is the last of it here. Now right now I'm not going to start it right now because I have some other things I want to do to this bike first, but I just want to put the oil in it. So it's just one less thing you forget to do later on. So we'll check it here in just a second at the dipstick and see what the dipstick says on the fill cap. Let that run down for a minute. I know they recommend a thinner oil for the winter. I don't plan on driving this or riding this bike anytime right now due to how cold it is. I have another bike that I ride in the winter, so I'm probably just going to have this in storage and just run it, start it every once in a while just to let it run and keep the fuel flowing through the carbs and keep the oil flowing through it. So I'm not going to really take it out and ride it. I know it's cold, and I don't have any reason to ride it right now with it. Roads are salty and nasty, and so we're just gonna hold off till spring for this bike. It starts getting warmer. I still need to get tags and everything for it as well, but same thing, no sense in paying insurance and tags when it's just going to be sitting. I am going to go with antique tags on this bike, so be much cheaper to own. That's the plan anyhow. Alright. So we'll put the dipstick back in, and let's just see what it reads without starting it right now. Can't really tell on that. It's hard to get this dipstick in and out of here. These cables in the way. Yep, it's right on the max mark. So I'm happy with that, and we still have a few more things to do to this bike.